Record. Okay, just a warning to you, since we're recording these lectures, they're going to be on the Echo and on the YouTube, and that means if you ask a question or something like that, you may be audible, so just be mindful of that. I have this omnidirectional mic, it's pointed towards me. As a matter of fact, I have to do a better job at repeating questions that are asked, but I just warn you, if you're very shy, maybe don't try to speak too loud when I'm asking a question or something like that. Sorry, let me get this back up. Okay. Welcome to CSSE1001 Intro to Software Engineering. We're glad to have everyone here to go around the carousel again for me. Who am I? I'm the course coordinator, or one of them. My name's Dr. Paul Verbeek. That's my email. That's my office, and if you want to have an appointment with me, just send me an email and I'll be glad to meet any one of you in my office. My my bona fides, my credentials, the reason I'm allowed to sit here is that I have a PhD in computer science from Canada. That's why I sound weird, and I may still be depressed from our current U.S. hockey loss. I felt real adult sadness and cried real adult tears that morning. But let's save the hockey stuff for later. I did something called computational algebraic geometry. I was a software engineer for a company called Maple. I don't know if any of you have ever used Wolfram Alpha or the thing that helps you cheat in your calculus homework. That's from me. You're welcome. Okay. I have a degree in pure mathematics from Simon Fraser University, which is a university in Vancouver, Canada. And before that, I was studying at McMaster University. I both have a pure mathematics degree and a computer science degree, because as we'll find out today, that computer science is also sort of a subdiscipline of mathematics. There's a lot of shared connective tissue between those disciplines. I've been teaching here since 2020. I think this is maybe the 8th or 9th time that I've taught this course. It's underwent some small changes, some large changes since I've taken it. It's been iterating towards something that's been quite popular and well received. Before this, I was an assistant professor at the University of Toronto, teaching math and computer science. And before that, I was at the University of Newcastle, Australia, teaching mathematics, where I met a lovely woman from Ipswich, who I eventually married, and this is why I find myself in Brisbane, Australia. My dual, I'll bring here, Dr. Kasra. He's from a little-known institution called MIT. I don't know if any of you heard of this small institution. I'll let him carry it away, just make sure you're in there.
So I'm just here to just say hi and see your faces. Is this on?
I hope so. Right here.
Okay. So I'm Kasra. You won't be able to pronounce my last name. That's all right. Just call me Kasra. My office is in the same building, but room 348. If you'd like to see me, please send me an email. I'm happy to meet you anytime. So I did my undergrad in Iran, and then I did my PhD in Sydney at UTS. I'm a roboticist. I work in robotics and machine learning and AI. Hopefully we'll do research together later at some point. So I was at MIT, and then I worked for CSIRO for a couple of years, and I'm 1 year ahead of you. So this is my second year at UQ, and I also work at the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science.
Okay. Thank you, Kasra. Yes,
see you for the next
awkward head fist bump. Okay, all right. Okay, so we are going to be taking, him and I will be collectively taking you on your journey into learning computer science at this university. It's going to be fun if we all dedicate ourselves to learning and programming. Some of you are going to find this very, very enjoyable. Hopefully most of you. Okay, so what I'm going to do, 3 lectures today. We're going to go through course Administrivia. That's just stuff like extension policies and when stuff is due. And then I'm going to tell you about the history of computing, because I think before you start engaging in a topic that it's important to have your sort of sense and place in history. None of it is going to be testable, so you're just going to be able to kick back and enjoy that lecture. And then finally, we're going to end with a lecture on arithmetic, which I made a little bit more spicy and interesting by sort of making it a lecture in our first foray into learning what semantics and syntax is, right? So let's take it away. Okay, so this is an introductory course for people who have never programmed. We're going to basically be teaching everything from scratch. If you don't know anything about programming, that's not a problem. We have people who have no programming experience come into this course every year to achieve a 7, which is the highest possible grade that you can achieve in this course, and go on and even do more computing. There's something called the bug, and if you're bit by the computing bug, that's sort of the greatest thing that I can accomplish in this class. Some of you may learn to love this discipline, and I hope most of you do. This is a very large course. Actually, it's smaller from when I've taken it, but it's still quite large. There's 890 students, 18 teaching assistants, 2 instructors, and two coordinators. So there's a lot of plays that we're going to have spinning at all time, but we have a lot of funding and support at our disposal for that reason. We're going to have weekly applied classes and weekly practicals starting week 2. I know there's been some confusion about this, but since we're Thursday, there can't be that much confusion left because there's only one more day to be confused. But these activities will start next week. There are 4 different things, right? So we have these things that we call applied classes, where the purpose of that is to go and work through some type of substantive sort of sheet, right? And you're going to get help from a tutor who at the end of the applied class will sort of take up the activity with everyone. The practical is a dedicated time where you can get help with your assessments, because we're going to be asking you to design some software. There's going to be some confusion generated when you're designing that software. You may want to speak with someone who can help you, and those practicals are dedicated times for doing that. Now, we're not going to be deploying an assessment item for a few weeks, so for the time being, what we're going to do in these practicals is a little bit of programming practice that we ultimately need everyone to do by themselves at home. Right? These are called the Ed lessons. I'll show you how to access them. So critical to the onboarding or learning of this vocation, this is like a skill set, right? Learning how to program is like learning how to play piano. Like you're going to come here, I'm going to tell you what the notes are, I'm going to play piano for you and show you that it's lovely and enjoyable. But unless you actually go home and practice these things, you're never going to onboard the skill set of programming. So to facilitate this, we have a lot of little sort of pieces of work that you can try at home. These are called the Ed lessons. They're built directly into the Ed discussion forum. I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. We have 2 summative assessments. Now that's the big things that sort of students care about, which formative means we need you to do it to get good, but they're not worth anything. Summative means we need you to do them because they're worth grades, right? So the summative ones I think are important. We're going to give you 2 of them. They're going to be sort of significant programming assessments, which you're going to upload to a website for evaluation. In addition to that, we're going to have a mid-semester examination and a final examination. This is the marking scheme. So your first assessment is going to be worth 15% of your grade. Your second assessment is going to be worth 20% of your grade. And there's some ORs here. Now, we're going to have a mid-semester examination. I believe it's tentatively scheduled at week 5. I do not wish to demoralize anyone at the middle of the year, right? So what we have is like 2 different grading schemes. With the advent of things like ChatGPT, there's a lot of opportunities to never engage in coursework and convince yourself that you're engaging in coursework. So something that the midterm has been providing is just sort of like a mid-year checkup to be like, if we lock you in a room and ask you to program and take away all of these tools, are you actually able to do it? And some people find, oh no, I don't. So rather than really penalize people at the mid-semester, we say, look, if you do well, the mid-semester is worth 25%. If you don't do well, we're going to crank that down to 10% and reweight that to your exam so you have another opportunity to do well in this course. This is what this course is about, trying to give everyone as many opportunities to succeed as we can. The reason we had to introduce a midterm is because what with the advent of ChatGPT, people are having the realization that they can't code on the exam, which is a hurdled assessment item. So that's the other thing that's relevant here. You're not going to get a percentage at the end of this journey. You're going to get a grade. That grade's going to be from 1 to 7. And in order to achieve any sort of nominal passing grade, so passes are like 4, 5, 6, 7. 3 is like this weird transient state between passing and unpassing, but the minimum requirement is that you get a 40% on the exam. Like 3/4 of the exam is multiple choice, so I think statistically speaking, guessing gets you to like 20% of the exam, so you don't actually have to do much more to get beyond that. I've taken all of these hurdles and lowered them to the lowest possible allowed levels, right? Because again, as much opportunity for everyone to succeed as possible, right? So to pass this course, you just have to accrue half the marks during the course and get 40% on the exam. Right, and we're here for you through that journey. Otherwise, you can see the rest of the marks If you get a 65% mark and an exam grade of 50%, then you get a 5. A 75% mark and an exam grade of 60, you get a 6. And a mark of 85% and an exam grade of 70%, then we'll give you a 7, which is the highest possible mark that we can give everyone. And in addition to that, I reserve the right to push all the marks up if I want. I do not have the ability to push the marks down, which I don't think you want me to have that ability. But at the end of the year, I also have this little bit of leverage to sort of push people up the chain, and I do so every year. Okay, so what do these grades mean aside? Oh, yes.
Just about the exam
Yeah.
mark on the previous slide. Is that on the final or both on the
No, this is E means exam. Mid-semester mark is not a hurdle assessment item, right? So you could totally catastrophically fail the inter-semester examination, and if that happens, you've just sacrificed 10% of your mark, so you still have a lot of leverage to even get a 7. You can fail miserably the midterm examination and still get quite a high mark in this class. Again, I'm not trying to demoralize everyone at the midterm. Oh, sorry, sir, you can't sit on the stairs. There'll be a very angry person who. Is anyone seated next to an empty seat? Oh, perfect. Oh, okay. We've sorted itself out. We're already off to a great start. Okay. What do these grades mean aside from the thing that ultimately shows up on your transcript? They're supposed to loosely communicate to these outcomes. So like a 3 is like a marginal fail. That basically means you're going to get another, hands up if you have an empty seat for the gentleman. Great. There's some empty seats. Okay. So you can get yourself sort of like enough marks to not pass and not fail. So if you find yourself at the 3 band at the end of this term, what we're going to do is give you another opportunity to take the exam or another opportunity to repeat some type of assessment that you may have failed. So again, lots of opportunities. A 4 is a pass. So if you get a 4, what we've said is, okay, you've achieved a functional achievement of these course learning outcomes. Here's a credit. If you get a 5, we've designated you as proficient in this course. And I would probably say you want to be at least getting a 5 if you plan on like doing much more computing. And that's not to say that's the minimum requirement. I'm saying that's the sufficient requirement. Like if you get a sufficient proficient understanding of this course, if you earn a 5, we're confident that you can continue down this chain and succeed. A 6 is an advanced achievement of this course learning outcome, and 7 is like supposed to designate course mastery, right? So this actually used to be a much more difficult grade to obtain. Back like 10 years ago, you actually had to do like a totally different project and present it to the course coordinator and the class. We no longer exist in that ecosystem. Here's the course schedule. So it's broken into 3 colors, which correspond to 3 different modules. I teach the first module and the last module, and Casper comes in and teaches the middle module. So the green module is an imperative programming. That's basically just going to teach you the basic imperatives, simplest imperatives of programming, like the if statement, the while loop, and sequencing. We're going to do that for the first 6 weeks. Then Casper's going to come in and he's going to teach you about a code organizational strategy called object-oriented programming. And then I'm going to come in at the end and tell you a little bit about some advanced fun topics, like really interesting things like recursion and talking about sorting and complexity. As you see here, I have all the deadlines already listed up there. My style as a course coordinator is not to communicate with the class very often. I think you guys get flooded with notifications. I don't want to add to that flood. So what I recommend is you put these dates into your calendar at the first possible convenience, because if you expect to get some type of email from me saying, hey, your assessment's due in 7 days, 6 days, 5, no, I don't do that. I'm just telling you right now when things are going to be deployed and when they're due. There's this notion of a soft release and a hard release. So every year when we release we have to come up with a totally new assessment for everyone to do. And during this, there's going to be bugs in our auto grader. We're not going to have adequately explained ourselves. So sometimes, like, we're going to release the assessment a week early to have people who are really keen to start yell at us about how it's like not described properly, and for us to work out bugs behind the scene. And then a week later, we're going to like properly release it. So we expect most people to only start working at these assessments at the real release. So it's going to be a little bit of time before we give everyone the first assessment. So that's going to be around week 5. But that's not to say that there's not going to be any work to be done. So we need everyone to learn enough programming first before we're able to give some type of substantive assessment for everyone to do. The first due date actually is week 8. The due dates are always on Friday. And then subsequent to that, we're going to release A2 at week 9, and then your last deadline's at week 12. Now, I have no control when the intersemester is scheduled. They told me it would be week 5, 6, 7, or 8. And I said, that's fine, anything but week 5. So naturally, they got back to me and said, we've scheduled your intersemester at week 5, right? So great favor by the timetabling. So tentatively, this intersemester is scheduled for Saturday of week 5. I don't know what time or anything like that, but it will show up in your individualized schedules. Tentative. Don't hold me to this. I just have sort of the draft release schedule. So this will probably have to come out. I'm not going to teach you something in a week and then test you on it like literally two days later. So that's going to, don't stress too much about that. As you see in this column, we also have coverage. Right, so the things that we expect you to know for each assessment item, the things that are expected for you to know for the exam are all delineated there. So please do take this schedule and insert them into your calendars. Okay, course resources. Very recently, we put in a lot of energy into creating web versions of all of the notes, which are a little bit more substantive than the slides that we're doing because there's writing in between. It's a lot more easy to copy-paste from these web resources. So you're going to see lecture slides, lecture code, and then lecture notes. They're all effectively the same thing, just described at different levels of detail and stuff like that. But do check out these notes. They're all online. All of your applied classes are also going to be online at these web pages. We've delineated tasks. You can actually check these boxes if you want as you go along. And the other course resources, so I hope you've all become acclimated with the EdSTEM. So the EdSTEM is a pretty critical place for us to coexist. This is where you can ask your colleagues questions, where you can ask tutors questions. I think the average response time last year to a question on EdSTEM was something like a few minutes, right? So you can get very rapid help from here. So normally, if you email me any type of content question, you're just going to get a standard response of please go ask this on the EdSTEM. There's very little reason to email me personally. You really should only email me personally if there's some type of personal issue that has to be addressed. And even in that case, you should be emailing the course email, which is the one down there. Email me specifically if you want to meet me specifically, and I'm happy to meet any of you in my office if you'd like. Okay, so this is the course discussion forum, and we have special access to something called Ed Lessons. So you'll see on your Ed discussion for this class that you have an extra icon up there, and I think it's supposed to look like a person standing behind a book. It's that symbol right there. And if you click it, it's going to open up these Ed Lessons. And these Ed Lessons are structured on a week-to-week basis. And they're just giving you little bites of programming practice, right? So that's how we're sort of going to, if you try to just do the assessment after not programming anything, that's going to go poorly, right? We need to learn how to crawl a bit before we're asking you to jog. And the best way to learn programming is to engage in practice. And here is your practice. Again, they're worth no marks. So it's aggressively pointless to go into these Ed Lessons, give it to ChatGPT, and paste it back to get a green check mark, unless you're like really like green check marks. I plead with everyone to please try and engage with these questions as much as possible. They say there's an aphorism that says confusion is the sweat of learning. Right? You should be confused sometimes. That's not a bad thing. We're going to push you a little bit further than maybe you're comfortable, but that's like going to the gym, right? When you go to the gym, you're trying to lift a little bit more than you are currently able to lift to gain muscle, right? So I want to give you all sort of intellectual muscles doing the same thing. Okay, so we're going to have to program, and we're going to have to program in an integrated development environment, right? So some of you may have been programming things like Jupyter notebooks or online. This is no longer going to be adequate for our purposes of software development. So you're going to have to at least download IDLE. This is going to be the officially supported integrated development environment. It means that you can program Python code into this window and run it with that window. But any IDE is going to be sufficient in this class. I'm going to use VS Code when demonstrating to you guys because I teach other classes in other paradigms and it's too much of a context switch for me to be changing everything all the time. But JetBrains is also fine. It's just this is the only one that we're going to officially support. But I think the tutors are quite helpful if you go with them and ask, right? So you are going to have to install a little bit of software. If that's something that you need some help with, go to next week's first tutorial. The first tutorial is a tutorial about installing this tool and using it for the first time. More help. Okay, so in addition to the practicals and applied classes and seeing me and seeing Kasra, there are 2 other places that you're going to be able to get help. So when I first came here, like half a decade ago, I noticed that there is this giant room across from my office with a great view of the lake that was never used. And I said, hey, can I have that? And they said, yes. So what we do is on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, oh, that may be out of date, actually. Okay, so I'll have to blast. Okay, so we have a room where there's going to be tutors sitting there who you can drop in and ask for support. That's certainly not the hours. We used to run it every day for 8 hours, but our budget's sort of gone down. So I think there's at least 3 days where I'm going to be able to staff this for 5 hours or something like that. So this is a great place to just go study. Like that's actually the specific purpose of this room. It's like a hangout room for people studying computer science. So if you want to go study there, I think it's a great place to meet your colleagues and form study groups, and it will be staffed. It's staffed so you can go get drop-in support. If you're feeling a little bit apprehensive about starting computing, this is a great time to go and get like literal hours of one-on-one support from a tutor who will mostly be sitting idle until we deploy an assessment. Okay, so that's extra help number 1. Geez, I think I may have been using these wrong slides. Okay, so there's another help room that's actually down the hall from this one, which is called the Code Clinic. And that Code Clinic, so this one is a dedicated help resource to us. The Code Clinic is a help resource for anyone at this university who has coding in their class. But you can also go to that Code Clinic down the hall. And that Code Clinic is open every day, Monday to Friday. I believe they're staffing it from like 9 to 5. I think I already put up, their sort of course, their mascot is like some weird turtle duck. I put some signage up on here. So it's just this building down there. So it's building 78, that's general purpose north. I think it's over that way, I think. Don't fact check me. I'm like terrible with direction, but lots of help at your disposal if you want to get help. Okay, so the late policy has changed. So if you're with us again, just keep that in mind. So the new late policy is this. So if you're sick, genuinely, you can apply for an extension for up to 7 days. We're unable to offer any extensions beyond 7 days because we have to release marks and solutions for these things. Everyone can utilize a cascading penalty of late marks. So if you submit 1 hour late, that's a 10% penalty. If you submit 26 hours late, that's a 20% penalty. So it's a 10% penalty per day. Right, but as soon as you step into the day, that's a 10% penalty. I don't think if we're all stay on track. Like the first deadline is until like week 6 or 7. We're giving a lot of time to do these. We're going to try and keep everyone on track. But just know this. Now, the other thing that you need to know is that us receiving your work is different than you transmitting your work. Right, so you're going to have to upload your work to a repository where it gets graded. And what happens around deadline is that like we have 800 students who are all trying to upload their work to our servers, and our servers get kind of overwhelmed. So don't be trying to like submit your work at like, I think they're usually due at 3 o'clock. Don't be playing chicken at like trying to upload these things at 29 minutes and at 2 o'clock and 59 minutes and 30 seconds, right? That being said, if you submit and it goes in a few minutes late, don't panic. Like, I'm not that punitive. There's like a little bit of a buffer for when we're going to accept this type of work. I don't want to tell you what the buffer is because then you're just going to play chicken with that buffer, okay? So there's a buffer. It's of the order of enough time to capture everyone who may submit a few minutes late. So don't be panicked if you ever submit a few minutes late. With regards to academic integrity, I could like just go through all the strict policies, but like generally speaking, just don't cheat. Okay, don't cheat. You have to treat all of the assessments that we've been giving you as practice for the examination, which is really the assessment that's going to matter to get you out of this course. Utilizing some of these tools can be done for good. Utilizing some of these tools can be done for bad. I'm not saying don't use ChatGPT or stuff like that. It seems to be a really effective way of getting tutoring or unwrapping some concept that you are not very familiar with. But it's also possible to say, ChatGPT, here's the spec that we were given, solve it, and it will do it comprehensively for you. So don't do that. Please don't. It's not worth it. You're not going to learn. It will catch up to you. Okay, so that's not necessarily cheating. Okay, so I have this provision. Okay, which I'll read after this. Okay, so we'll put that type of academic integrity aside. I can really give you a line to not cross. Don't give your code to other people, and don't ask other people for their code. Right? Every year, there's some situation where there's like Alice and Bob are working independently. Bob goes, I'm so stressed, I haven't done any work. Alice, please, can I just see your code? I promise you I won't copy it. Alice, if Bob ever tells you this, he's lying. He's lying every time, okay? We've had so many cases of people saying, I lent my code, the person promised that they wouldn't copy it. Guess what? It was copied. Right? We have very sophisticated tools for detecting when two codes are similar. It's not, so the best way to get caught for this is trying to obfuscate your code from us. So you may think that you take someone else's code, you just change all of the variables. Like we detect that immediately, and that's actually pretty damning evidence that you are trying to subvert these things, right? So just don't share code. You can talk about the work as much as you'd like. You can get an arbitrary amount of help from the appropriate channels, but at the time that you're actually transmitting code to other people or receiving code from other people, you have crossed the line. Okay, with regards to ChatGPT usage, which is something that we're not allowed to prohibit you from doing, I have this provision in our ECP, which you're going to basically see in all computing courses at this university. And it's effectively a statement that says, at any given time, I reserve the right to orally examine any student regarding any of the submission that they made. Right, so if you've submitted something from ChatGPT and genuinely have no idea how it works, I can call you into my office and say, what does this do? And if you are unable to answer that question, I am legally authorized to moderate your grade down to 0. Right, so the bare minimum is you need to understand anything that you're submitting to us. And this is just something you're going to have to get used to. Most of us in computing are now going to utilize this. It has been utilized in the past. So just keep that in mind. The things that you submit have to be understood and defensible by you. Right? So I may ask you to do something like, oh, you made a game with 2 players. Change your code so that player 2 is the first person to go rather than player 1. Or reverse the order of play in here. Okay? Don't share assessment code. Okay, so how to succeed? Practice. Practice is the most essential part of onboarding programming. The other part is learning how to debug. So most of the time, your work won't work until it does work, and then it's working, and then we can leave it, right? So what I'm going to do in this class is program for you from scratch, and genuinely, I'm going to try to solve problems I've never tackled before, so you can see me screw up and correct. And to learn that it's not a big deal when you screw up, right? So we just have to all get used to failing and then recovering. No one ever writes perfect code on the first try, excepting Steve Wozniak, right? You have to read a little bit of history to understand the context from that. So failure is okay, right? Giving up, that's the thing that's not okay. But struggling is okay. This is expected in a normal aspect of learning how to program. And learning how to debug is going to be almost more critical than learning how to program. Debugging is taking code that's almost working and fixing it. And in fact, most of the discipline or job of a software engineer is not to create new software, but to debug current software, right? Software is very hard to create and very hard to get working perfectly. And then finally, do well on the exam. Right, that's basically the singular assessment item that decides most people's grades. Okay, so just some expectation setting, because expectation is the root of all heartache, as Shakespeare said. And since some of you may be in university for the first time, I just want to show you what the difference really is between post-secondary and secondary education. Right, so in a high school, you have 20 weeks of instruction, 5 hours per week. That's 100 hours of instruction. You have 30 classmates, and your teachers teach you. That is aggressively not what we're doing at the university setting. Just from a practical standpoint, I have 12 weeks with y'all, 2 hours per week. That's 24 hours of me talking at you. I cannot speak the ability to program into an individual in 24 hours. That is impossible. The purpose of these classes are me to say, look, Here's the material that you are going to have to go learn and become an expert at. I'm going to give you first contact with this material, how to think about it, what resources are at your disposal. Let's do some practice together, but you have to do most of the learning outside of this course. There is 1,000 of you. As much as I'd love to give everyone a personalized attention, it's not feasible, right? So as teachers teach you, instructors are here to basically be a guide on your learning journey. It's not explicitly our job to teach. It's our job to guide you, and that's a little bit of an expectation that you may have to adjust in your mind. Right, that's what I just said. Okay, I am a human. Like, I know this may seem weird, and I know I'm Canadian, but understand that I am going to make errors. I have 2 young children, 3 and 5. By the time I'm here, I've already executed literal hours of screaming and feeding and dressing and drop-offs. Like, I am typically operating on exhaustion. So many things are going wrong behind the scenes that no one is privy to. Like, I like to say, I'm spinning a lot of plates. Most of those plates are on fire. It's amazing that any of these things are run effectively at all. So I just ask you that you give me grace. We are trying incredibly hard to give you the highest quality product that we can, but it's going to be imperfect. And as we said, imperfection's fine. It's just it's part of humanity, right? So please be nice to me. Please be nice to Kasra. And I demand that you're nice to my teaching staff. Like, I don't mind if someone, well, I do mind, but I'll get over it if you disrespect me. If you disrespect one of my teaching staff, there is going to be a problem, okay? So we all have to act cordially. I know that we get stressed and stuff like that, but don't abuse my teaching staff. And I say this because there's been a history of my staff being abused, which I don't want to repeat. Okay, so is there any questions regarding Administrivia before I start moving to actually talking about computer science, right? Any concerns? Nothing. Okay, before we move on, I have duck stickers. And I'm going to be asking questions. And if you're brave enough to ask questions, I will give you a sticker, right? And the gifts that I give away during the year get better and better and better. I don't know if you've noticed, we have stickers. Now everyone's super engaged. Okay, yes. Okay, let's move on. Let's just keep that in mind. The policy regarding getting gifts from me in class is that I will put them on the table when you get a gift, and it's the honor system. You come up after class and you get one. But if you want a sticker after class, just come shake my hand, introduce yourself. I'll give you a sticker. But that's Ducky, our course mascot. There's shirts if you want. Okay, so what I want to do now is have a drink of coffee. And I want to get stuck into this discipline. And I said the first thing I want to do is establish our place in time. Right? Because we're going to be studying a vocation, and this vocation comes with the rich and fascinating history. And I just want to share part of that history with you before we start. None of this is testable. This is not just something that I want you to enjoy. When I started learning computing, this was taught to me. There's a really great book by Walt Isaacson called The Innovators. If you intend on studying computer science, I highly recommend that you read that book. Again, it's Walt Isaacson, The Innovators. But let's get to it. And I open up this question. This question I used to open up this class every year. And it's interesting about the answers that we get. So those of you've come to study computer science or software engineering. Can anyone tell me what a computer is? Yes, sir.
Something that can compute a program.
I'll give you a sticker just because, inaugural answer. But there's a lot of loaded statements. So my colleague down there said something that can compute a program. And it's like, well, what does compute mean? What's program mean? And is that necessarily the case? Right? So if I have a computer, I take away your keyboard. Is it a computer? If I take away the mouse, is it a computer? If I take away the screen, is it a computer? How about down here?
Something that can take in a set of instructions and set of inputs, and according to a set of instructions, give a given output or a given input.
So it has to take an input in order to be a computer? I'll give you a sticker in any case. One more try in the back. I don't want to neglect the back. A machine that performs arithmetic. I love that answer. A computer is a machine. Shh. normally I get some type of variation like a computer is a fancy calculator. And that's true. Like fundamentally what you're like all computers are just fancy calculators. And the thing that makes it fancy is that your computer can do like an ordered sequence of calculations. But that's it. That's all your computer can do is math. Add stuff together. The Fortnites that you do, the ChatGPT images of anime that you generate of yourselves, that all boils down to a sequence of mathematical instructions. Fundamentally, right? So these are the first computers. Right? The term computer didn't even necessarily like talk about a machine. So in science, so these were women who were working at Harvard for a celestial mechanic. A celestial mechanic, actually that's what my dad is a type of scientist interested in orbital mechanics, like how these celestial objects are orbiting around one another. You'll learn in your journey here as scientists that we can like approximate a lot of natural world using equations, but then we can't solve those equations. The only recourse we have for solving equations is through like numerical methods. And numerical methods basically are just ones where you just have to like do a ton of arithmetic to determine the answer to something. Those of you taking numerical methods or those of you taking calculus right now are going to be learning about these numerical methods, right? So the very first computers were people who very carefully on these tables would just do hundreds and hundreds of mathematical computations. Now we took this and we put it into a machine so it could do it quickly and so it could do it without error, but these were the first computers. There's like a bunch of different things that we have to be concerned about. Okay, so we have a machine that can compute with numbers, that can do math. So the natural question then becomes, well, what can that machine do? Like, what does it mean to be computable, right? And specifically, like, can computers answer all questions? Are there questions that machines cannot answer? And we didn't know, right? So this is Alan Turing. He is a famous mathematician who was very important during World War II because he cracked the Enigma machine, which was a device that the Germans were using to securely communicate with one another. And the breaking of that machine was instrumental into winning the war effort. It was done at a place called Bletchley Park. Some of the people who are working there are just now able to say, I work there, because they're under a secrecy type of legislation that would literally, if they told someone that they could do this, the penalty was death. My wife is a nurse, and she just actually quite recently was attending to someone in the hospital who was a scientist at Bletchley Park, which I thought was very cool. So Alan Turing is the person who gave a mathematical representation of what a computer is and importantly delineated the space of all things that we can compute. And importantly, there are definitely problems that computers can't compute. And I'll tell you the most famous one. There is no computer which I can say, hey, if I give that computer that set of instructions, will the computer eventually stop? That's called the halting problem, and we can't solve it. Not because computers are insufficiently powered, because the nature of the computer prohibits it from addressing that question, right? So this is a little bit of the computer science that you will eventually learn, right? So this is important. Like, we're going to be sitting in front of, I'm going to express to you what the power of your device is, but nonetheless, it's not going to be infinitely powerful. So Turing's definition of a computer is sort of in two pieces. So we start off with what we call a finite state machine, and that's just any type of machine that can exist in different states, like a lamp. A lamp is technically a computer that can remember the number 0 or the number 1, right? It can transition between its on state and off state, right? That technically satisfies the definition of what a finite state machine is. Your computer is a finite state machine because it has a finite number of bits, and all it can do is transition between those states, and there's a finite number of those states, an enormous number of those states, but that's all it's doing. So your computer is a finite state machine, a lamp is a finite state machine. These are sort of the underpinnings of what we call a computer. This is a Turing machine. So this is a finite state machine with one extra piece added to it, a tape. And on this tape, you can write stuff and you can read stuff. And this comprises no matter how much more stuff we add to the computational model, it doesn't get any more powerful than this. Right? This is the best that we can do computationally. Having a finite state machine with access to memory, effectively, is the best that we can do. This actually is a Turing machine, or what we can think about as a schematic for an adding machine. Like this is a blueprint that will add two numbers together and represent it, and you can go build this if you want to. That's why I said a computer doesn't necessarily have to take input. Like a soda machine, a pop machine is a computer, which inputs money and outputs soda and change to some respect. Okay, so Kasra, he teaches Comp 2048. This is the theory of computing, and this is when you'll learn to utilize computing at this level. This is not the level that we're going to learn it at, but it is what we did have to ask ourselves the question, if we have a computer, what is the space of things that we compute? Okay, this begs the question, okay, who cares about theory, perhaps? Maybe some of us are engineers. Who built the first computer? It's a little bit of a complicated question. Okay, so this is Charles Babbage. So he gave the schematics for the first, what we call general purpose computer, which is what my colleague down there was getting. A computer that could take a set of instructions and act on those instructions. And this was called the analytical engine, but we couldn't build it. So when he conceived of it in the 1800s, the engineering required to build it wasn't sophisticated enough yet. We eventually built parts of it, right? So this is the blueprint for the part of the computer that added numbers together. It's analytical engine. And eventually we did build the thing, but not till maybe a couple centuries later. You can see down here that there's like a crank, and there's like things that you have to pull and push. This is less strange to people who were in the 70s. The calculators back then looked like this. You had to grab a giant crank and pull it down in order for it to add two numbers together. This predates the digital era when we did start with sort of like steampunk type of computers. Okay, so the next thing we did, this begs the question then, who built the first computer that utilized electricity? And it was the Germans during the war effort. So it was called the Z3. It was built in 1941. And this is an honest-to-God computer which takes instructions and runs on electricity. This isn't this is a replica that was built. The original was destroyed during the war. But it could do one multiplication every 3 seconds. So it's a third of a multiplication per second. Probably the human computers could do a lot better than this, although the advantage here is that this was doing so exactly. Now, this is important. I'm now going to take you on a journey from what this first personal digital computer to the computer that are sitting in front of you, so you can appreciate how far we've come from 1940 till now. Okay, so what's the next computer? So this is the EDVAC, the Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer. It was built at the Ballistic Research Laboratory because back then computers cost millions of dollars, and only big corporations could buy them, and one of the big corporations or institutions that were interested in them was the Army. The Army has a lot of interest in firing a projectile and hitting something. And for this, they need to develop projectile tables to say, okay, if you set the velocity of the projectile to this and set the angle to this and fire it, it's going to land there. And the way to do this is just to do a lot of hand calculations, right? So they utilize this computer for building those projectile tables. It could do 340 multiplications per second and cost about $1.4 million. Does anyone know the individual in the picture? I could have given a duck. So this is von Neumann. So von Neumann was a physicist from Hungary, and he was part of a group that other scientists called the Martians. And they called them the Martians because people couldn't believe that these people, they were human. That's how smart they were. Von Neumann was generally regarded as smarter than Einstein. He just didn't land so much in the popular culture. But what he invented was the standard architecture of the computer. Right, so you see down here there are drums and there's circuitry up here. This is the thing that stuck. The computers that you're sitting in front of have von Neumann architecture. Right, so he was very important as the progenitor of the person who said, look, this is the way that we should build electronic machines. So von Neumann, very important person. This is the electronic numerical integrator in computer, which was commissioned by University of Pennsylvania. It cost $7.3 million in today's money and can do 3,000 computations a second. So we've gone from a third of a multiplication every second to, what was the last one? 300 multiplications every second now to 3,000. We seem to be incrementing by tens. This consumed so much power that while it operated, the city of Pennsylvania would experience brownouts. Right? This was not a very energy efficient device because it still used vacuum tubes in order for its operation, which is something that's not on your computers anymore. Okay, so we keep going. This is the Universal Automatic Computer designed for business administration, because if you think of large corporations, that would require the capacity for doing a lot of arithmetic automatically, who do you think would want to use something like that? Banks, accountants, payroll. Like, this was one of the first natural places, whoever said that could have a sticker, to deploy these computers. Does anyone know what IBM stands for? Back there, International Business Machines, right? Because the first consumers of proper computers were mostly businesses, right? So who were automating things like payroll. This one cost between $1.8 million and $14 million because we built a lot of them, and it fluctuated in cost depending on availability and stuff like that. Take economics if you want to learn why. But this could do about 2,000 per second. So 1/3 of a multiplication, 300, 3,000. This was the first computer that we had at the University of Queensland. It was installed in the Hawking Building, now the Prentice Center, although that's a little bit wrong. The building was installed for the computer, right? Because that's how big it was. If you YouTube this, you can find some old footage of this computer showing up on a barge with like a bunch of tradies carefully taking it off with tow hooks and like putting it onto trucks to come here and be built, because it weighed a literal ton. It's certainly not something that you'd be able to put on in your lap in here. So I don't know what the computing capacity of this was. I had problems finding it, but this was the first computer that the University of Queensland owned. This is the first integrated circuit, and this constitutes a very important progression in computing. It was invented by Jack Kilby, who won a Nobel Prize in physics. And it was the first time we utilized a material called silicon using our 4 computers. Does anyone know why silicon is an important material? Yes, sir. It's a semiconductor. That means that it doesn't emit much heat when you put electricity through it. Right? We don't want our computers to be machines that take electricity and generate heat. Heat is wasted energy. We want our computers to be machines that take in electricity and output mathematics. So he was able to take a lot of the circuitry involved in building computers and make it tiny, like put it onto something like this, so that eventually we could take those computers that required a metric ton of weight and barges to move, and we could utilize something called large-scale integration and put the whole thing onto a chip made of silicon that's about the size of your fingernail. This is about the size of your fingernail. It was the first commercially available microprocessor, and it could do maybe 100,000 instructions per second, right? So a third of a multiplication to 300 to 3,000 at millions of dollars, and now we have something the size of our fingernail that can do 100,000 multiplications per second. This is the Intel 8086, so this is one of the first examples of very large-scale integration, right? So we got better and better at cramming the circuitry onto these silicon chips. This one could do 2.5 million instructions per second and was available in 1978. So now we're getting into the millions of instructions per second. This is the first Pentium processor that I purchased as a boy back in the 1990s. I saved up all of my paper money. Papers are like the internet that you print on paper and hand to people. Like, it predates most people having the internet. It cost me a couple $1,000s, and it could do 188 million instructions per second. Right, so this is already something like hugely more powerful than even something 10, 15 years ago. Continuing. Okay, so this is the most up-to-date chipset available when I wrote these slides maybe 5 years ago. And this is sort of the punchline of this. You are likely sitting in front of a computer that utilizes ultra-large-scale integration. This is the AMD Ryzen Threadripper 390X, okay? So it costs $4,000, and it does 2.4 million computations per second. I don't know what number that is. I'm not saying 2.4 million. I'm saying 2.4 million a million times, right? So think now how incredibly powerful the laptop you're sitting in front of is. It is doing something on the order of millions of computations per second. And part of what we want you to be excited about and learn is to harness that power for good, hopefully, right? For science, for curing disease, right? Because someone from 50 years ago would find it unbelievable that we had computers that were working at this level. It is simply unbelievable how much progress we've made in the computing space. I don't think we will ever see such a rapid increase in technology ever again in human existence. You are truly at the tail end of an amazing point in time, right? Okay, so we talked about what computers are, but we're like, this isn't computer engineering, this is software engineering. So what is software? Yes, sir.
It's what gives the computer instructions.
Yeah, okay, so I talked about a general purpose machine, and I said what constitutes a general purpose machine is the ability to take in an instruction set and act on that instruction set. So software is going to be that instruction set. So software is the complement of hardware. They're the instructions to the machine. And that's what I'm going to be teaching everyone here. How to write instructions to the machine so we can utilize the millions and millions and millions of computations per second that the machine is providing to us. This is Ada Lovelace. She was an English mathematician. She was the only child to a poet. She really wanted to be an artist, but her mom said, no arts for you. You got to do something more practical. You got to go into STEM. Luckily, she was very brilliant with mathematics as well. She was enshrouded in a love triangle with Babbage, actually. And she described an algorithm. So recall, Babbage was the fellow who built the schematics for a computer that we weren't able to build. But Ada said, if you build that machine, here is a set of instructions that are going to compute Bernoulli numbers on that machine. What does this mean? Ada Lovelace is the first computer programmer, period. Right? This is a very important person to us. She's basically the grandmother of everything in software engineering. She is so important, in fact, I named my daughter after her. This is Ada Laura Verbeek, my daughter. I'm going to update this picture every year until she becomes old enough to be embarrassed by it, but still at the moment she's able to do it, right? So Ada Lovelace, this is a name that you should remember, first computer programmer. The insights that she has in her writing is incredible. She says, not only have I produced the first computer program, I anticipate one day that we're going to be able to take things like music and codify it to be stored on a computer. I anticipate that one day we're going to be able to figure out how to get these computers to generate poetry. Sorry, you can't sit on the stairs or I get in trouble. But we do have some seats available to you, gentlemen, if we can get some helping hands up to get everyone seated. Okay, going through more people, because this is a people-driven industry. I want you to understand that we had to develop these things, and these things were developed by people. This is Grace Hopper. I thought at one point the Americans were asking who should put on the $10 bill. I thought Grace Hopper should be put on that $10 bill. She was a United States Navy Rear Admiral. Little bit of an Easter egg for this class. Sorry, sir, you can't sit on the stairs. You got to find a seat if you can find one. And there's a couple over there actually, if you'd like. They recorded some recruitment videos of me for this university, and I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I was watching Thrawn that night. So I mistakenly said that Grace Hopper was a Grand Admiral, which isn't a rank in the Navy, but it is a rank in the Star Wars universe that Thrawn has. So that never got corrected. So there's a little bit of an Easter egg for you. She was the pioneer of what we call machine-independent programming. So we build computers. AMD builds computers, Apple builds computers, Intel builds computers, and each of these companies think they know best about how to instruct their machine. This is called the machine code. Right? So that is to say, if I wrote an instruction set for a Apple machine, that's not going to run on a Windows machine because the machinery is expecting different types of instructions. So this was becoming a problem because you don't want to have to learn how to program on all of the available computing that's available at that time. So Grace Hopper said, listen, this is dumb. Why don't we develop some type of language which we can agree on, and then each of you computing companies will build a translator to translate from this common language into the machine language of your choice, which is a process called compilation. And you can learn about compilers at these upper years. So she invented something called COBOL, which is the Common Business-Oriented Language. And this was a very important language. In fact, it was just in the news yesterday. 95% of ATMs currently run on COBOL. Still. Right, part of the millennium, but does anyone remember why? No, of course, if you won't. Y2K, right? When the clocks rolled over from 1999 to the year 2000, I was 16, a lot happier, right? Full of life, right? But there's a big concern that everything would break because everything was written in COBOL, and in COBOL, to save like we didn't have a lot of memory back then. To save on memory, we represented dates by 2 digits instead of 4. So at the turn of the century, or millennia, we didn't know what was going to happen when all this critical infrastructure, like power plants and ATMs, would interpret the year as being year 0. We're around still, so everything is fine, I guess, but there was a lot of panic. So COBOL is still very, very, very relevant. A lot of this old code, it still exists because it's so effective. Okay, so we said we have machines. We have to describe software to give to the machines. How do we give the software to the machine? Well, this is a computer called the Jacquard Loom. You input wool and it outputs a textured blanket for you. And the way that it works is, so normally when you're developing any type of blanket, you have to sit in front of a loom and then someone passes a wood brick over or under string in such a way that the outcome of that is that you generate a blanket. And Jacquard figured out how to automate this process by having this sort of card underneath where needles would go through or not, and it would build it for you. And we sort of lifted this idea and developed something called a punch card. So each of these lines corresponded to a instruction that you could give to the machine. And this is how we first started programming. My dad used to work in a computing center where basically he would type things on punch cards and they go through a machine. This is the largest punch card program ever created. It's about 5 megabytes. To give you some context about how little memory that is, if you take a picture with your phone, bare minimum, that's going to be 25 megabytes, right? So you can understand why we don't want a program like this anymore. Like even threading all of the punch cards to the machine is going to take a long time. If any of them comes out of order, the whole thing is broken. But this is the first way that we were instructing some of these large machines, through these punch cards. This is sort of where the term computer bug comes from. So actually, this was like one of the answers to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? This is one of the first $1 million questions. What insect landed on a punch card? That was the genesis of the word bug. But Grace Hopper, who I was just talking about, she wrote a program on these punch cards and it wasn't working properly. So she went through all of her punch cards and she took one out and she saw that a moth landed on one of the punch cards and was covering up one of the holes, which changed the meaning of the program that she was running. And that's the moth right there. And you can see it's relay number 70, panel F, moth and relay. First actual case of bug being found, right? So this is sort of loosely why we find computer bugs. It traces its way back to this case. This is machine code that instructs the architecture of a 32-bit machine. Does anyone know what it does? No, I don't know either, right? But like it says things like in memory location 55, push what's in EBP, then from memory location 89 to E5, move what's in memory location EBP to ESP. This genuinely does do something, but I don't think, we don't program like this because it'd be very difficult, right? We want to program in a higher level language that's going to translate itself into the machine code. So I'm going to walk you up this chain of translations. This is assembly. It's sort of, you can write an assembly and it translates itself into a machine code. It's looking a little bit more sensible, but still a little bit incomprehensible. This is Fortran. It's the formula translator. It's my first job as a software engineer was writing in Fortran. It was terrible. I don't recommend this to anyone. But you can see, so Fortran would compile into assembly code, which would compile into machine code. This is COBOL, right? You start seeing English words start to materialize, like procedure and perform, until, right? Some of the modern features of programming languages are beginning to materialize. This is the C programming language. This is what I learned when I was first learning how to program. And this is the Python programming language, what you will be learning how to program in. And it turns out all of those pieces of software were the same instructions of telling a computer how to take a power. Right, so it was the instruction set for saying, hey, this is how you take x to the power of y. If I give you 2 and I give you 3, you're going to return 8. So the reason we call Python a high-level programming language is because it's very removed from the low-level hardware. Like Python gets translated into C, which then gets translated into assembly, and that assembly gets translated into machine code. But we get to exist at a higher level where it's going to be sort of more friendly programming, much more friendly than telling bits to move around a computer. So this is a modern computing language. It was developed, I think, in the 1990s. It's named after the British comedy troupe Monty Python. That's why you may see Python memes being pushed out across various places. If you have Netflix, there's a thing called Monty Python, the best bits. Like, I am your king. Well, I didn't vote for you. Like, you may already be familiar with some of these memes online. We chose it because it's low barrier to entry. It's very easy to get going with Python. It supports a variety of programming styles, and it's sort of becoming an industry standard. So it's fun to program in. To finish off this, we talked about, yes, sir?
Ordered set of instructions.
Oh, you're already ahead of me. So what is an algorithm? Okay, so I talked about what a computer was. I talked about what software is. I just want to finish talking about what an algorithm is. And my colleague over there said it's an ordered set of instructions, which is almost there. So an algorithm is an ordered, unambiguous set of instructions that terminates. One of the most important parts about programming a computer is that the computer is dumb. The computer can only follow instructions blindly. It doesn't have any concept of nuance, okay? So when we're programming, we're going to have to program in such a way where everything that we write has exactly one interpretation by the computer so that it goes and does that. But an algorithm is something that we can describe independent of a programming language. For example, I can say, here's how you can sort a list. Here's a list of numbers that are out of order. Go look at every pair, and if they're out of order, swap them. And keep doing that until you've noticed that you've done no swaps. And then the list will be in order. So another aspect of learning computing is not just what the syntax and not just learning how to program a computer, but learning the strategies of problem solving using a computer. It's like, I told you that your computers can do sequences of mathematical instructions. What sequences of mathematical instructions takes a picture of a duck and identifies that as duck? That takes a lot of development. I need to understand that we've done that. We've instructed the computer, we've told the computer, do these set of mathematical instructions when I give you a duck, and you will be able to identify that duck as a duck. Right? That's fundamentally what's happening. Nothing more complicated than that. It feels like wizardry, but it's actually just mathematics. Okay, so what is computer science? Computer science is the practice or art of creating algorithms and measuring their effectiveness. I've shown you one way of sorting a list. Is it the only way of sorting a list? No. Is it the best way of sorting a list? Not even close. Right? So some of you will have to make this decision between software engineering and computer science. Computer science is the study of sort of the meta strategies of utilizing computers to solve problems. That's what I am. I'm a computer scientist. If you look at my PhD dissertation, it's not code, it's an algorithm. There is something, they're like, we don't know how to compute that. And they're like, I'm like, oh, I do. It took 6 years, but I figured it out, right? And then they gave me a doctorate, and then I'm sitting in front, I get to teach this class. So what is software engineering? That's different. Software engineering is the practice or art of creating and maintaining software. So actually programming software on a computer using a computing language. But importantly, you're going to have to learn how to do this in teams. And that's where it falls apart, right? Programming for yourself may be easy when you're aware of why you called this variable x287, when you know why you did something. But we have to teach you how to work on software packages that are going to be touched by hundreds of people. So we're going to be sort of demanding that your code satisfies, it looks nice. We need to code exactly in the same style so we can all understand each other's work if that becomes necessary. But that's sort of the difference between computer science and software engineering. Software engineering is a practice. Okay, so that ends sort of I don't want to say ends the fun, but that from this point on, I'm actually going to be introducing content. Is there any questions or things that you're interested about computing history that you want me to elaborate on, or just want to jump into learning how to program? Shh. Yes, miss. Can we get a 10-minute break? If I give 400 people a 10-minute break, it's not going to be a 10-minute break. Okay, 2-minute break. Okay, take a 2-minute break. Yeah. Yeah. Ben.
still use today, or is it like?
Well, you can make a different architecture if you want, but that's the one that we use. Right? I don't think you're going to find. Well, quantum computing is going to have different architectures, but that's like a fundamental different computational model. So the answer is yes, but like practically speaking, not really. Yeah. Yes, miss? I give you all the notes, so no, like, just listen to me, yeah. Like I'll give you everything. The slides are there, like everything. Just listen to me. I know this may be, yeah. Just listen to me. That's the best, yeah. Oh yeah. There you go. No problem. Well, did you develop any software in MATLAB, or you're just defining one-off functions and utilizing it?
I guess running programs, like just taking data and making.
You're going to have to be writing something that's like hundreds of lines of code that has various functions that are going to be intercalling one another. So that's the answer.
Okay, I was just curious. I was just like, I don't know what that is. Why?
Yeah, it's because we're going to be doing much more substantive programming than maybe what you've done. Yeah. Like MATLAB is a laboratory. You don't really develop software in MATLAB. You utilize MATLAB as like a fancy calculator.
Yeah.
Cool. Who is next? Yes.
Do you know for IDEs? You say VS Code list of using Linux, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, well, if you're using Linux, I'm not sure that you need to be advice from me at all. Like, you can use Vim if you want. I'm just saying idle is the one that we officially are supporting. Yeah.
I'll see, because I haven't actually committed to any software yet, so I was like, oh, right.
Just pick whatever you want. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Like everyone just calls me Paul. I don't like it, but that's culturally seems to be what the case is. Yeah. Pardon me?
Python, the main thing to a person like JavaScript or something?
Well, preference, effectively, right? Yeah. No, I can teach you in anything, really. It's just that that's what it's a friendly programming language. Yeah, it's next year. Yeah. So, Python doesn't have a typing system, and I think no typing system, no memory management. So I think that's a little bit friendlier to onboard. Exactly. Hello, Sunny. Let me have the sticker. Hello, Grace. Nice to meet you. Hi, Doris. Have a duck. Yeah.
I was just wondering, what is the obsession with dots? Like, where did it stem from? We're just really curious.
Well, you'll have to ask the tutors about that, right? But officially, it's rubber duck programming, right?
Okay.
There's something called rubber duck programming.
Very cool.
That's officially the story of the duck. If you ask your tutors, they may give you the actual reason why ducks are.
Yeah, so do you like carry this with you like every class?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Very cool.
Yeah, I actually have like various sizes. Like it's crazy how like and people keep trying to find like a duck that like fits in this ascending chain of ducks. Yeah. Yes, you're not. It's okay that you're here, but you're not actually allocated a seat in the class. Right? Delayed viewing means that there's 800 students. There's 400 seats in this lecture hall, right? So it's fine. By next week, there'll be tons more. Okay. So, but you're delayed viewing, and there's nothing we can do to change that. Right? The first 400 people got allocated seats. Okay. Have a duck. Don't feel bad. Okay. What's up? You want a duck?
Thank you. Yeah, we want a dot too, is that okay?
How was the fruit basket going?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Thank you.
I want my duck back, right? That's okay. Keep it. It's intersection multiplicities via triangular decomposition. Yeah, very fun, right? Very relatable. You can search my name, it'll come up, right? It's not going to be very relatable, but it's in computational algebraic geometry. Okay. Okay, let's get back to it. Hello. What's happening? Okay. I hope you feel rested. Let's keep going. Shh. I got to keep going because we're going to run out of time. I used to have to go to 3-hour lectures. Okay. Python as a calculator. Let's get started. Let's make sure that we're recording. That's the important one. Okay. It's always the danger. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is utilize Python as a calculator because I said that computers are effectively just fancy calculators. So our first steps with Python are just going to be utilizing it like a fancy calculator. Though if I just came here and did a bunch of adding and subtracting and multiplying, that can be kind of dry. Right, so I actually have an ulterior motive in showing you these these expressions. So the learning objective today is to understand these two new terms, syntax and semantics. Syntax is how we write things to the computer, and specifically we have to write it in such a way where it's in the syntax of Python, where it's readable by Python. And semantics are the meaning of the things that we write, right? So we can write things that are syntactically correct, and they will have a semantics, which is the thing that the computer will end up doing. Because Python can evaluate arithmetic expressions, but, okay, in order to not make these expressions ambiguous, which is illegal, right? There can be no ambiguity in any instruction we give to the computer. We're going to have to designate an order of operations, and we're going to have to designate associativity rules in order to disambiguate some of the arithmetic expressions that we are able to write. The first thing that I want to start off with is basically give a primer about how to read my slides. I had idle open at the beginning of class, but it kept snapping back. But let's see if I can open it. It just may not be visible on the okay. So this is the Python REPL. Actually, maybe I should share it. I just feel bad. I feel bad now. Here. Okay, this is the Python REPL. It's colored a little bit differently than idle is going to be colored. I think idle is white, and this one is black. But it's fundamentally the same thing. Okay, so the Python REPL is a interactive mode of Python. This is sort of a more modern feature of programming languages. These REPLs didn't exist when I was learning. And what they allow us to do is type in single instructions to Python and hit enter and get a response back, right? So we have to be careful with what we're calling things. This isn't Python. Python is the language that we're writing, and this is Python REPL, right? This is the read, evaluate, print loop. So when you look at my slides, if you see chevrons like this is designating that we're working within the REPL, that I'm executing one-line sort of instructions to the machine and asking for output. And the reason it's called a REPL is because you type something, like 2 times 3, excuse me. Copy solves everything. Then you hit enter, so it gets read. And after you hit enter, it gets evaluated, and then it prints, and then it asks you for more input. It loops itself, right? So this is why it's what's called a REPL. So when you see these in my slides, you are to interpret this as working in this interactive environment. And when we start working in files, those chevrons have no meaning. They're not in the syntax of Python. So you have to be careful about what you're considering lines, right? So again, this is the prompt. It's not actually included in any instruction. It's just delineating that Python is ready to accept some expression for evaluation. So a programming language like Python, anything that we write in Python is going to have a syntax and a semantics. The syntax of a language defines what it means to be a valid program. We can only give Python things that are valid programs. If one character is out of place, that makes it an invalid program. Python can do nothing with it. The practical consequences of this for your things like your homework is if one character is out of place on your homework and you upload it to our grade scope, it gets 0 because we can't read it. Right? We have to be very detail oriented when software engineering. One colon out of place, one number that's supposed to be 0 can have catastrophic outcomes. Right? So the first thing that we have to make sure to do is write programs that are syntactically correct. And once we've written something that's a valid program, that valid program is going to have a semantics, right? That is, it's going to do something, right? So this is a syntactically correct Python program, right? It knows how to read 2 plus 3. Its semantics is do 2 plus 3. Go to the algorithmic logic unit and ask it to perform the operation 2 plus 3. We actually call that an imperative, and it's going to return 5. I teach different programming languages. In Lisp, you write addition like this using reverse Polish notation. This would be appropriate in the Lisp program. This is part of Lisp's syntax, but it is not part of Python's syntax. So if I ask Python to evaluate this, it's going to say, I don't know what this means. This is not part of my language, right? Syntax errors are kind of better because you're going to be told, Python will point to exactly the place that it can't read, right? So you can identify it rather quickly. This is different than a bug. A bug is a program that is syntactically correct that's not working properly. Like if 2 plus 3 returns 7. It was accepted by the language, but it's not doing what we expect it to do. That's a bug. Bugs are the things that are harder to track. Syntax errors will be easy to find. But the first order of business with software programming is write programs that are syntactically correct. Otherwise, nothing else can happen. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just tell you what the syntax rules are for arithmetic. I'm going to tell you what Python is going to identify as valid programs that compute numbers together. So the first syntax rule is this. If you give me a valid expression, like 2 or 2 plus 3, then putting brackets around it is still valid. Okay? So the semantics of this is that things that are in brackets move up in the order of evaluation. Things in brackets get evaluated first. Okay. 2 is a program. Okay. If I put brackets around 2, is that a program? Is that syntactically correct? Yes, we get 2 back. If I do this, is this a syntactically correct program? It's kind of an unfair question. Okay, so yes, it is, because internally, spaces are ignored in these arithmetic expressions. You can't have a space at the beginning here. If you did something like space bracket 2 plus 2, it gets cranky. Oh, that's a syntax error for a different reason. You're not allowed to have leading spaces. In Python, spacing is sort of important, but within expressions, arithmetic ones, it doesn't matter. You can use spacing. And in fact, we're going to use spacing deliberately for good. If I put double brackets around 2, is that a program? Why not? 2 is a program. Bracketed 2 is a syntactically correct program. Bracketed 2 is a syntactically correct program. We're just applying the rule set recursively. So that also gives us 2. Is 2 bracket a syntactically correct program? No, where's its friends, right? Okay, it's expecting to see its other bracket, right? So here, if you don't give Python a expression which is included in its syntax, you're going to get a syntax error, which is one of the many errors that we're going to be encountering throughout our journey here. Here's more rules for arithmetic. Any syntactically correct arithmetic expression can be affirmed or negated. That means if x is a valid Python expression, then plus x is a valid Python expression, and minus x is a valid Python expression. And the meaning or semantics of these two syntaxes is that you multiply or multiply by plus 1 or multiply by negative 1. Okay, so plus 3, is this syntactically correct? Yes, because 3 is syntactically correct. Putting plus in front of anything that's syntactically correct is syntactically correct. This is syntactically correct. We get 3 black. Is plus space 3 okay? Yes, because it ignores, as long as you don't have a leading space, all the other space is kind of ignored. So that happens. What about plus 3? Yes, 3 is correct. Plus 3 is syntactically correct. And I could put plus in front of any syntactically correct statement, so that is fine. So that also gives us 3. Should we ever write anything like that? No, right? It's crazy. It's like, but technically speaking, it's in Python's syntax. How about this? If I bracket everything, is it still syntactically? Now I'm mixing some of these rules. Yeah, bracketed 3 is fine. Plus bracketed 3 is fine. Bracketing that's fine. Putting plus in front of that is fine. But we should just write 3 instead of writing something sort of like needlessly complicated. 3 plus? Is there any syntax rule that lets me put plus after something that's syntactically correct? No. Okay, so we're going to get invalid syntax error here. All right, let's up the difficulty ability. Okay, so 3, fine. Minus 3. Yes, right, because I'm allowed to put minus in front of a syntactically correct operation. Minus space 3. Yes, because spaces are ignored. Minus minus 3. Yes, 3 is correct, minus 3 is correct, minus minus 3 correct, but it returns back as 3, something sensible. Okay, nothing too crazy yet. Minus plus 3. Yes, 3 is fine, plus 3 is fine, minus 3. Okay, good, we're switched on today. Plus minus 3. Yes, that gives us minus 3 back. Plus minus plus minus plus minus 3. Okay, but what is it? I think minus 3, okay. But we'd never write something like at line 1, we'd never write something at line 4 or line 7. I'm just showing you that technically speaking, these expressions are syntactically correct expressions that then therefore have semantics in the system. Any syntactically correct arithmetic expression can be added or subtracted to one another. That is to say, if x and y are both syntactically correct, then x plus y is correct and x minus y is correct. And the expression gets evaluated to the sum or difference according to the rules of map. 2 plus 3, is that fine? Yes, because 2 is 3, 2 is fine, 3 is fine. I can put pluses in between things. That's fine. 2 minus 3. Yes, that gives us minus 1. 2 plus minus 3. Is that fine? What does it give back? 0. Okay, yes, gives us 0. So this is an important observation now. Because space is ignored, we should use space for good. And the way that we should use space for good is to write something like 10 and not 7. Writing something like 10 more clearly groups what is happening. It makes more sense to say 3 plus minus 3 rather than 3 space plus space minus space 3. Right? Python allows you a lot of leverage with space, and we need to utilize it to write programs whose semantics is more clear by just in the manner that we're writing it. Python is going to have a lot of rules regarding how we should write things to send signals to one another to make it easier to read our programs. Plus 1 plus 3. Is this going to be okay? I shake your nose. Why no, sir? Aren't we allowed to put plus in front of things that are syntactically correct? Yeah, so I think these first pluses are going to be affirmations. So 3, affirm that, affirm 1, and then add those two things together to get 4. If we wrote it like this, is it sort of more clear why that's going to give us 4? Yeah, therefore we should write something like the latter and not the former. 2 minus minus 2, is this going to be okay? Yes, right, it's going to give us 4, but it's better to write it like this, as 2 minus minus 2. That gives us 4. Perfect. Multiplication. I'm just going to go through all of them, but it's going to get a little bit more interesting because we're going to have to discuss some cultural differences. Any syntactically correct arithmetic expression can be multiplied by another one. So if you have x and you have y, then you can put multiplication in front of them, and that remains to be fine. So 2 is fine, 3 is fine. I can put multiplication in front of those two things. The semantics is to go and multiply those two things together to get 6. What about this one? 2 plus 3 times 2 minus 1. What's the problem now? There's a learning objective here. Yes, sir.
We need an order of operations.
Yeah, so the computer is not allowed to misinterpret this, right? And we all sort of know because we've learned that we should be doing multiplication before addition. But like, why? Like that sort of decision was arbitrary. We could have designed this in such a way which is just doing the arithmetic left to right. That would have been fine. It turns out this is going to do multiplication first, but that's important, right? So now we're going to have to discuss what the actual precedence of order is. Like what operations get done before other operations. Because what happened here was we had we did 3 times 2 first. That became 6. We left added 2 to that to get 8 minus 1 gives us 7. If we change the order, so what do brackets do? What are the semantics of brackets, as I said a few slides ago? Well, brackets change the evaluation order, right? So here I'm changing the evaluation order by doing brackets. So this is now going to be 5 times 2 minus 1, which is going to be 9, I believe, right? So brackets aren't useless, right? It seemed when I first introduced them that they're kind of redundant, but now we're seeing they're necessary in order to move evaluation orders around. Okay, so note since that this 1 plus 2 times 3 plus 4 is 11, we can conclude from this that multiplication was done first. But now we have to sort of lay out more rules to say, look, these expressions cannot be ambiguous in their interpretation. So let's make them non-ambiguous. Okay, so here are all of the operations that I have expressed to you so far. And this is the order that they're dealt with. Okay, so the first thing that's dealt with is brackets. They have the highest order of precedence. The next thing that is dealt with are minuses or pluses that you've put in front of numbers, negations or affirmations. The next thing that is dealt with is multiplications, and the next thing that is dealt with are additions and subtractions. Is this enough to disambiguate our expressions? Are we missing anything? Well, well, not that we don't have enough operators yet. I'll introduce the rest of the operators. So according to our rules of evaluation order, what does this evaluate to? 4, right? Because multiplication happens first. It's 10 minus 6. We get 4. Is this going to work? Yeah, because the subtraction the negation happens first. That turns that 3 into a minus 3. We get 2 times minus 3. That's a minus 6. But we should have written it like this. They're equivalent syntactically and semantically, but the second way of writing it is much more clear. Right, so we're going to write things more clearly. Is this going to work? What does it evaluate to?
-9.
-9? Okay, that's very confident. I'll give you a duck. I'm not actually sure. So the first thing that happens is that negation and that negation. So minus 2 times minus 3 is 6. 1 minus 6 is minus 5 minus 4 is minus 9. Good job. Right? But it's better to write it like this in order to delineate the order of operations, I think, more cleanly than that. What does this equal? 1 minus 2 plus 3. I made this an exam question once, and like 30% of the class got it wrong. You laugh, right? But like, why do you laugh? Why are you laughing? What is 1 minus 2 plus 3? It's what? It's 2. Why?
Because addition and subtraction have the same precedence.
Shh.
Left to right.
Well, I think we all did minus before we did plus. But I didn't tell you that was the case yet. I didn't, why can't it be 1 minus 5? Why didn't we do that plus first? No, well, the syntax of this, we're putting a negation in between two things. So the interpretation there is that it's a subtraction. But that's a good point, that we ought to be careful with negation. It actually has two meanings, right? So we did this before we did that. But if I changed the evaluation order, it could have been minus 4. And a lot of people were second guessing themselves on the exam, thinking it was a trick question. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we still don't have a sufficient amount of rules to disambiguate situations like this. Yes? How do we know the difference? So negation, you will see, is as a unary type of operator. It won't be in between two things, right? And it will also, it's the first thing that you try to do, right? Because if you interpreted that as negation, then the resulting expression wouldn't be syntactically correct, right? Yeah, it's a little bit troubling that we have an overloaded symbol for that reason, right? Shh. Pardon me? No, the code doesn't change based on spaces, no. So it's not the fact that there are spaces here, it's the fact that there's something to the left of minus and something to the right of minus. And Python's language rules say, look for subtractions before you look for negations. But negations are evaluated first. That's something that talks about language parsing, which is something I don't really want to get into at the moment, but for those of you taking programming languages later, you'll learn about a syntax and parse tree, which is the answer to that question. But anyways, okay, so it's still not sufficient. We still do not have enough rules to disambiguate even statements, simple statements like 1 minus 2 plus 3. So here's the rule. Any syntactically correct arithmetic expression can be added, subtracted, multiplied, divided, integer, divided, remainder, or powered by one another. We have all of the arithmetic that you are used to, plus probably a little bit more. And here's their syntax, right? So if I have x and y and they're both valid, then x plus y is valid, x minus y is valid, x times y is valid, x divided by y is valid, x integer divided by y is valid, x modulo y is valid, and x to the power of y is valid. And the semantics here is the expressions get evaluated according to the rules of math. So here's now the complete table of precedence order of arithmetic, something you are going to have to remember, because this will change depending on programming language. These are not universal rules. Cautionary tale. Someone last year gave ChatGPT an expression and had ChatGPT evaluate it, and it evaluated to something differently than Python evaluated to, because ChatGPT was using a different order of evaluation. So it's important that we're saying that it's this for us. Yes?
So it's basically just all asked with an
I guess it's just effectively BODMAS, right? But like go onto Facebook or whatever the social media network is that's cool with Gen Z, and you will occasionally find some meme like evaluate this expression, and people will argue to the death about how it evaluates, because there are cultural differences at play about how things get evaluated. But no such thing as a cultural difference in Python, because it's just this. Shh. Parentheses gets evaluated at first order of priority. Exponents get evaluated next. Subtraction and negation gets evaluated after that. Multiplication, division, integer division, and remainder after that. And subtraction and addition as the lowest order of evaluation. Now, the order that I write them here has nothing to do with how they're evaluated. I'm not trying to say here, evaluate multiplication before division. I'm saying these have equivalent evaluational precedence. Right? So the next thing that I have to do is talk about associativity. Okay, so this is one integer divided by 2. One integer divided by 2 is 0. I'll just tell you that for the time being, because this will change. If I evaluate what's highlighted first, you get 3 times 0. And if I evaluate that second, you're going to get 1. It turns out this is 1. So from that we can, and that gives you 0. From that we can deduce that the brackets are actually here. So it is mostly the case, with all but one exception, that when you encounter expressions of the same order of precedence, that you evaluate them left to right. The mathematical fancy terminology here is left associatively. You imagine that there are brackets stacked to the left. The single exception to this rule is exponentiation. Exponentiation is evaluated right associatively. It's unique among all of the other operations I gave you. So anything to the power of 0 is 1. So if 2 to the power of 1 is 2 to the power of 0 is 1. So if I evaluated it from the left, we would get 1 here. But we're getting 2 because that was evaluated first. Right? 1 to the exponent 0 is 1. 2 to the power of 1 gives you 2. Right? So it's not that. Okay, so operations with the same precedence are left associative, excepting exponentiation, which is right associative. That means, okay, so if you see an expression that looks like this, and hash and at are operations of the same operational precedence, it is implied that those brackets are there. Right? We could solve all of this by simply including brackets, but our expressions would get so polluted with brackets that they'd become unreadable. Right? This is why we've provisioned an order of operations in order to disobligate the requirement of using brackets. Okay, so some other problems that are going to arise. Okay, so there's something called closure. When you started learning numbers in school, we had to keep adding new numbers every time that you did something which required a new number. You may not have totally realized this. We had you start counting. So you knew 0 and 1 and 2 and 3, and you could add those numbers together, no problem. 4 plus 2 gives you 6. But when we started subtracting numbers, you needed more numbers now. It was inadequate to subtract over the counting numbers. We had to say, oh, look, 2 minus 4 is actually this new number called minus 2. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is take the naturals and extend them to minuses. And the same is going to be true here. If we just have integers, what does 4 divided by 2 give us? 2. But what does 2 divided by 4 give us? A half. Well, half isn't an integer. Okay, so then we have to say, okay, sorry, we introduced another operation that actually requires that we extend the number system. So that's what's happening here. Like you've learned more. It's like, oh, sorry, we also need square roots now. Sorry, we also need complex numbers now. Every time we can't solve an equation, we have to invent a new number so that equation becomes solvable. Eventually, you're going to learn about all of them. I think the last ones are quaternions or something like that. But the problem here is that you can't take 4 divided by 2 is going to need a new number. And this new number is called a float, which effectively means decimal number. But working with decimal numbers on a computer is very problematic because we can't represent them. Okay, so 4 divided by 2 is 2.0. It's class 2 is an integer, but 2.0 is a float. So things like this, just to practice, right? We're going to look at these brackets. That's 3. That's 3, so that becomes 3. Then we do 6 divided by 2. That becomes 3 times 3 is 9. And it ends up 9.0. So as soon as you use this division symbol, because you can't divide over integers, you're now moving to the space of floats. And we're going to not use floats in this class, period, right? Because they come with too much baggage, right? So don't use the division symbol. I'm going to show you another division that is an integer division, because as soon as you start using float numbers, things can go bad for this reason. What's 1 divided by 3? Well, it's 0.33 indefinitely. Can we store 0.33 indefinitely on a computer? No. Okay, so that means the best we can ever do with 1/3 is approximate it. Okay, so that means if you want to work with floats, what you're actually doing is working with approximations. And that's a problem, because an approximation is a number which is kind of wrong. And if you want to add that to another number which is kind of wrong, you get a new number which is even more wrong. So if you work with floats, you may be like, the person's height is 1 meter plus minus a kilometer. And it's like, that's not useful information. Okay, so there are whole classes after this that you have to take in numerical computation. And numerical computation is the specific study of working with floating point numbers. They require a lot of consideration. We're not going to utilize them because they come with all of those complications. Is this a syntactically correct Python expression? Well, is 0 syntactically correct? Is 1 syntactically correct? Can I put the division symbol in between 2 syntactically correct? Okay, so this is syntactically correct. Does it have semantics? No. You can't divide 0 into something. Okay, so this is more close to a bug. Like Python says this is fine syntactically, and only once it reads it does it realize that there's a problem. So this is not a syntax error anymore. This is a 0 division error. This is the second error that we've encountered today, right? So we've learned about syntax errors. That's when things are not even in the readable by Python. Now we have a division error, which is something that is readable by Python but is problematic to Python for some type of reason. Do you think this will work? Okay, so this ends up giving you 0. Okay, so we do actually have a number that represents infinity on a computer. I'm showing you this because it becomes actually very useful for logical flow later on. But this makes sense, right? Can your computer represent all of the numbers? No. Does it therefore have the largest number that it can represent? Yes. Is 1 more than that number effectively infinity on your computer? Yeah, for all intents and purposes it is, right? So that's how we've implemented infinity into the system. It's an operating system imperative that's basically equivalent to 1 more than the maximum integer represented by your computer. We're going to get some leverage out of this. Infinity goes into 1 0 times. Okay, so just practicing a little bit more of our exponency of our arithmetic. So 2 to the power of 3 gives us 8. 2 to the power of 3.0 gives us 8.0. Just to emphasize the fact that as soon as you start using floating point numbers, floats are in. Right? Even though 2 to the power of 3.0 could be 8 exactly. Right? So be careful. Do not start introducing decimals. We really want to avoid them. 2 to the power of -1, is this a syntactically correct Python program? Yes, because 1 is correct, -1 is correct. I can put exponents in between 2 things that are correct. So this is going to be, the interpretation here is going to be 2 to the power of -1, which is a half in this instance. 2 to the power of 0, is that fine? Yes, that's going to end up being 1. 0 to the power of 0. Is it 0? Is it 1? Can it be both? In Python, it's 1. I don't want any of you mathematicians actually professoring me and telling me what the limit of the... Okay, I know. The other thing that we have to get comfortable at, it's not even a comfort, it's a power. When we're programming the computer, 0 to the power of 0 has to go to something. And we get to tell it what it is. So we, as Python programmers, said, stuff you mathematicians, it's 1. It is 1, don't argue. That's what we just programmed it with it. But some of these decisions were kind of arbitrary. Okay, so this is important. So please listen up, right? This is the difference between an error and a bug. Okay, some of you from other programming languages may have utilized a different symbol for exponentiation. That symbol in other programming languages is the caret operator. The caret operator is not the operator for exponentiation in Python. It's the XOR operator. You don't need to know what that means. It's exclusive OR. You just need to know that Python is going to accept this as a syntactically correct statement that has a semantics that returns to you a number. So 2 XOR 3 is 1, 4 XOR 1 is 5. If you use this in a computation in your software is not going to be incorrect syntactically, but it's going to be operating in bizarre ways, right? So this is what we like. This is a bug, right? If you use the wrong symbol and Python's happily computing away, not knowing that you meant exponentiation and not the caret operator, going in and finding, oh crap, this is supposed to be exponentiation, not XOR. That's sort of the nature of bug hunting, which is a skill set that we're going to have to give you. The last thing I want to finish off with today is I essentially said don't divide, but we're going to have to divide sometimes. So I just want to show you how to divide that we don't have to introduce a fraction. Do you all remember what a quotient and remainder was? Do you remember long division? I'm not sure if this is still something that's taught. When I was in school, we learned something called long division. And it's where you'd put like 17 in a box, and you just keep writing so that you generate something called the quotient and remainder. So I can say something like 17 is 5 remainder 2. 17 divided by 3 is 5 remainder 2, because 3 goes into 17 5 times with 2 left over. You can express it like this, as like an improper fraction. If you multiply this whole thing by 3, you end up getting there. It's the 2 equivalent ways. We're going to use quotient and remainder rather than using division, right? So 17 divided by 3 is going to give you the number of times 3 goes into 17, which is 5. 17 remainder by 3 is going to tell you what the remainder is after putting in 3 to 17 as many times as you can, which is called 2. This is what we call an invariance, right? So 3 times 17 quotiented by 3 plus 17 remainder by 3 should just give you 17 back. Your tutorial, either for this week or next week, is working out how these expressions operate on negative numbers. There's a little bit of nuance there. Soon I'm going to teach you actually how these division algorithms are written into the computer. There's no giant table in your computer that has remembered all of the divisions. Division is a process that we can explain to the computer. The computer can really only do addition and subtraction. And here's how we utilize addition and subtraction to get, I still have 5 minutes. If we lose 5 minutes every lecture, I've lost the whole lecture. We can explain to the computer how to use this atomic operations like addition and subtraction in order to gain the next ones, right? So in the lecture on looping, I'm going to show you how we take addition and subtraction and build multiplication and build division and build exponentiation. So we can get used to so this is the whole point of us. The computer can do a set of basic instructions, and we can take those basic instructions and make more sophisticated instructions, and we can take those instructions and make more sophisticated instructions, and we can exist in what is called the subtraction chain and finally develop software that manages to drive a car, which fundamentally is just a series of additions and subtractions that the computer is giving. Eventually I'm going to show you how we can write that procedure using recursively using functional programming. Okay, let's test our knowledge. This was like genuinely an exam question. We'll do 2 exam questions, and I'll let everyone go. 2 to the power of 3 mod 5 minus 1. Yes? D? Everyone says 7? Okay, so let's just do it like this. What's the first thing that gets evaluated? Shh. What's the operation with highest order? Yeah. The power. So that becomes 8. What's next? The mod, 8 mod 5 is 3 minus 1 is 2. So I think that's B. Okay. What about this one? Shh. And then I'll let you go, I promise. If we get a correct answer to this, we can do some duck distribution. Yes, sir? B. Okay, so what's the operation that happens first? Exponentiation, that's 25. What's next? Yes, then this, that's 70. Then 70 mod 20, that's 5. I think 25 goes into 70 twice. That's for 50 with 20 left over. B, redemption. Okay, 40% of the class got this wrong on the exam. There's going to be an arithmetic question on your exam. Please don't get it wrong. I'm trying to get, it's 1% of your total grade for getting an arithmetic question. Okay, I'll see you guys next week, right? You guys have a good weekend, right? Bye, chat, if you're around. No problem. Thanks for your attention, Miss Brown. See you on Monday.